Yo guys, welcome back to a brand new video. It took me forever, but we're finally here. Alliance Battle support guide going through each and every single restriction. So yeah, buckle your seatbelts because this is gonna be a long one. So yeah, I'm just gonna go through each and every single restriction, give you guys my opinion on which supports you should pick and almost all the possible support options. This is a complete free-to-play guide, so I'm gonna be skipping out on the paywall seasonal uniforms, but I'm still gonna include the seasonal uniforms that you can buy for crystals. Now before we jump into the first restriction, I just want to take a quick second to say this. This video took a long time and testing to put together. We are talking 48 different Alliance Battle restrictions. I had to collect data, figure out niche supports, and then compile everything into one complete breakdown. It took me well over 6 to 8 hours to do properly. There were no shortcuts. So if this video helps you save crystals, resources, and build smarter, all I ask is that you hit the like and subscribe button. It genuinely helps the channel grow more than you think, especially with long detailed videos like this. And if you want to take it a step further, I've also opened my channel memberships. By becoming a member, you get to pick future video ideas, get early access to new content. I also am going to be doing your account reviews and advise you regarding your builds, and also get in direct contact with me. So yeah, joining as a member is the best way to directly support the channel. It helps me make deep dive content like this consistently. And just to be fully transparent, my channel isn't monetized yet. So everything you are seeing here is built off pure grind and community support. Every like, comment, and subscription genuinely helps me keep pushing out content like this. So yeah, enough with the self-promo, let's get straight into the video. Starting off, we have Alliance Battle Extreme Day 1 with Speed Hero Female. The best supports for this day is by far Shuri and Wave for free-to-play players. Alternatively, you can also use Cassie Lang while you build up either of the other two characters. But yeah, the options for this day are very limited. So yeah, you just have to work with these three characters until they give us more speed female support characters. But yeah, skipping past day 2 and 3 with Alliance Battle Infinite, I'm going to be covering that later in the video. We have Alliance Battle Extreme Day 4 with Combat Female Restriction. This is a rough restriction because first of all, it doesn't have that many free-to-play DPS options. As for the supports, they are probably your best options as a DPS because I think Valkyrie performs the best here even though she is a support. But yeah, the characters that you can see on your screen are the best support characters for this restriction. Sif has a decent lead in addition to her support ability. Valk has a very good support ability. Athena is a brand new addition to the game and she has a very good support ability as well. And apart from that, you can also use She-Hulk's leadership, but she doesn't really have a universal support ability. But yeah, that concludes the supports for the Combat Female Restriction. Following that, we have Speed Villain for Alliance Battle Extreme Day 5 and Alliance Battle Legends Day 15. The best supports for this restriction are pay to win, but the free-to-play options are right on your screen. The standout options in my opinion are Mystique and Green Goblin because both of them provide universal support ability. Alternatively, Chasm is a good support for Miles Morales. And I also included Baron Zemo because of his leadership. He has a very good leadership. So yeah, if you are starting off and using like Gwenpool for example, you can use Baron Zemo's leadership for a decent buff in your scores. Next, we'll explore the Universal Villain Restriction. It's viable for Alliance Battle Extreme Day 6 and 15. This restriction has very limited good options. The best option is by far Proxima, and the other options are not that good for PvE. For example, both Victorious and Hela are built for PvP. However, Hela has Ignore Dodge, which is really good in Alliance Battle Extreme, and Victorious has a support artifact. So yeah, if you have her artifact, you can use her in Alliance Battle. And the other two uniforms that I mentioned are both outdated uniforms. First, we have Ebony Maw's uniform that turns him into a universal character again. That gives you, I think, 20% damage against universals. I might be wrong here, but I think the boss's typing's universal, so yeah, you can use that for the 20% extra damage. And similarly with Ronan, with the villain uniform, he gets like 20% ignore dodge, and in addition to that he also has a support artifact, so ideally you should be able to use that to your favor. Now we can move on to the next restriction. Mutant Male for Alliance Battle Extreme Day 7 and Alliance Battle Legends Day 27. For this restriction, there's only two viable support characters, Cyclops and Beast. So Beast gives you ignore dodge and it's decent for Alliance Battle Extreme. However, if you have two decent ranked DPSs for this restriction, you're better off using that instead. Because for example, if you have Gambit and if you pair him up with Wolverine, you can use the team up skill to deal more damage. I've experimented it myself and I saw better results when I used my Wolverine. But yeah, my Wolverine has a decent build on him, so yeah, you have to take that into consideration as well. This is a rough restriction, so yeah, don't sweat it too hard, take your time and build your characters. But yeah, moving forward, next up we have the Combat Hero restriction. For this restriction, you have a lot of options. In my opinion, the best two supports would be Valkyrie and M'Baku, because both of them have very good support artifacts in addition to their support buffs. But yeah, you can also use Sif, Taskmaster with the new uniform, Athena, and Warwolf as well. Warwolf has guaranteed crit rate as a support buff, and on top of that he has a support artifact that got added to the game very recently. So if you're lucky enough to pull that early on, you can utilize that in this restriction. And if you have Groot's seasonal uniform, you can also use that, but I don't think he's better than either M'Baku or Valkyrie. And if you are using Venom for this restriction, Sleeper would be a standout option as well. Agent Venom not so much, because his kit is primarily based around PvP support. So yeah, you can pair up Sleeper with M'Baku for example, or even Valkyrie. So yeah, following that we have the Combat Hero Human restriction. It's similar to the previous restriction. However, the human tag limits our options. The best options for this restriction is Taskmaster with the new uniform and M'Baku in my opinion. However, if you are also using Venom here, Agent Venom is also a usable option, and you can also use She-Hulk for her leadership. But yeah, this restriction qualifies for Alliance Battle Extreme Day 11 and also Alliance Battle Legends Day 28, the final day of the season. Right after that, we have Universal Hero Male restriction. The standout options in my opinion are Nova and Ronin because of their universal usability. You can also use Dr. Voodoo, but his support buff isn't that good. As for the niche supports, Beta Ray Bill is a decent support for alien characters, for example if you are using Zeus. And if you are using Ghost Rider for example, Robbie Reyes and Ghost Panther team up very well with him. Now I also must mention that Ghost Panther has some universal support buffs, so yeah, you can use him with like any DPS, not just flame elemental damage characters. So yeah, taking that into consideration, you have to mix and match your support characters to get the best value out of them. Lastly, this restriction is viable for Alliance Battle Extreme Day 12 and Alliance Battle Legends Day 22. With that being said, let's move on to the next restriction. For Alliance Battle Extreme Day 13, we have Blast Male restriction. You have very limited options for this restriction. Now the absolute best options would be Mysterio and Phil Coulson with his winter seasonal uniform. However, if you guys don't have either of them, you can use Phil Coulson without his seasonal uniform and use Leader. Now the winter seasonal uniforms are gonna be on sale soon, and I highly recommend picking up Phil Coulson's uniform because it's hands down one of the best support uniforms in the whole game. Too bad it's a seasonal uniform, but yeah, don't miss the opportunity to pick his uniform up. This uniform has insane value in every single PvE game mode. And in addition to that, it also has some PvE value because it gives you extra HP. But with that being said, we can move on to the Mutant Villain restriction. It's viable for Alliance Battle Extreme Day 14, and it only has two options. Cyclops with his Phoenix uniform and Mystique. Mystique is a Crystal Cost character, and I think this is the perfect time to pick her up, because I think she has insane value for free-to-play players once you pair her up with her uniform. And yeah, if you don't have Jean, she is also the standout DPS option. I think you can still use like Namor or like Cyclops with this uniform. But yeah, rather than wasting your crystals on a different uniform or character, I think you should invest it in Mystique because she is usable in several restrictions as a support character. Right after that, we have the Blast Villain restriction. Here, the best support option is Enchantress. Not so long ago, she got released from the paywall seasonal prison, but yeah, she is the standout option here. In addition to Enchantress, you can use any of these support characters, but Mysterio would be the best option. However, since he is a seasonal, a lot of you guys might not have him. So yeah, instead you can just use like Cyclops or Leader, for example. But yeah, before we move on, this restriction is viable for Alliance Battle Extreme Day 18. Right after the Blast Villain restriction, we have the Universal Hero restriction. It's viable for Alliance Battle Extreme Day 19, and we see a lot of familiar faces from Universal Hero Male restriction. The only new faces are Philavel and Angela. They aren't standout support, so I'm just gonna stick with the same advice I gave you before. The best supports are Ronan and Nova for universal use, and if you are using Ghost Rider, Ghost Panther and Robbie Reyes are the standout options. Now we have a brand new restriction that just got added, Alien Female. For this restriction, the standout supports are again Enchantress, Valkyrie, Athena. You can see all the supports that are viable for this restriction on your screen. The standout options in my opinion would be Valkyrie because of her support buff and her artifact, Athena and Enchantress for their support buffs. The other options are still decent, but these three are just better, especially if you have Valkyrie with her artifact. She is very free to play friendly and you can farm her from Dimension Mission and alternate ways. So yeah, be sure to get her as soon as possible. Right after that, we have the Blast Human Female restriction. I recently made a video on this restriction comparing Shine Rogers and Invisible Woman, so yeah, be sure to check that out in the description below. This restriction is only viable for Alliance Battle Extreme Day 21. But yeah, the standout option and the only option for this restriction is Ancient One and Ironheart. Alternatively, if you have Invisible Woman and if you want to use her here, you can use Valeria Richards as a support as well. But yeah, that's too niche to be included in this video. The two supports on your screen are your way to go. One slight issue is you have to buy Ancient One's older uniform. You're mainly buying her uniform for the ignore dodge. Apart from that, her support buffs don't really provide any more value. But yeah, with limited options, that's all you can do. But with that being said, let's move on to the next restriction. Now we have the Speed Human Male restriction. Now this restriction didn't really have that many good supports before, but with the addition of Amadeus Cho's new uniform, you have a very viable support option now. Now depending on who you use, you can combine any of the supports on your screen to the maximum value. I think Amadeus Cho stays a staple because he is a universal support for both villain and hero restriction, while most of these characters are very niche to their own typing. For example, Nick Fury is a superhero only support, Green Goblin is a super villain only support, and then we have Chasm for Miles Morales and Joaquin Torres for Falcon. But yeah, before we move on to the next restriction, this restriction is viable for Alliance Battle Extreme Day 22. Now we have the Hero Alien Male restriction. The standout options are Beta Ray Bill and Ronan because neither of them are seasonal uniforms and both are really good support characters. Ronan for obvious reasons being the better out of the two. Now if you do have the seasonal uniforms for Yondu and Groot, you can use them, but Yondu's seasonal uniform holds much greater value than Groot's seasonal uniform. The absolute best combination would most likely be Ronan paired up with Yondu. Lastly, this restriction is viable for Alliance Battle Extreme Day 25. Following that, for Alliance Battle Day 26, we have Combat Villain restriction. Here, the best two supports are in my opinion Taskmaster and Red Hulk because they provide universal buffs. However, if you are using a strong tag character, Titana is a really good option. Alternatively, if you are using Hulk for this restriction, Abomination is a must-use support character. But since his uniform is a seasonal uniform and a lot of you guys might not have him, he has to rank a lot lower in overall value. Subsequently, we have Universal Human Restriction for Alliance Battle Extreme Day 27. Given Nova is a Epic Quest character, I'd have to say Ghost Panther and Dr. Voodoo are the best options. Additionally, I included Ant-Man because he has a very good leadership. So yeah, if you have him at 6 stars, you can also utilize that. But yeah, as it stands, Ghost Panther and Dr. Voodoo together give you the best value as support characters as a free-to-play player. And now covering the final day of Alliance Battle Extreme, we have Villain Female Restriction. You only have 3 viable characters as support for this restriction. Proxima, a native tier 2 character, Mystique, a crystal cost character, and Enchantress, who is a premium character that you can obtain through different ways. But yeah, they all seem a bit expensive or premium at first glance, but their overall value in Alliance Battle is immense. But yeah, I would highly recommend investing in these characters so you get better scores over time. And with that, we transition into Alliance Battle Legends. For day 1 of ABL, we have Universal Male. Now I've covered all of these characters already, so I'd just suggest sticking with characters that you can obtain as soon as possible. Number 1 priority should be Ronin, and then probably Dr. Voodoo or Ghost Panther. But yeah, let's just move on to the next restriction. For Alliance Battle Legends Day 4, we have Villain Human Restriction. Now for this restriction, you have a lot of options. In my opinion, the standout options would be Green Goblin and Taskmaster because of their overall utility. However, you can use the other characters that you can see on your screen right now. There are a couple niche picks that I included here. For example, Red Hulk, you'd probably only use him if you are planning to use Hulk. Similarly, we also have Abomination and also Falcon with his zombie uniform for Doctor Strange, as he gives a juicy buff to zombie characters. Next up, Alliance Battle Legends Day 5, Blast Hero Restriction. As you can see, for this restriction, you have a lot of options. However, the 2 standout options are Cyclops and Dazzler. Dazzler has an insane support ability in addition to her support artifact. And then we have Cyclops, who has an insane leadership and an insane support buff. Now depending on who you use, you can switch that up. Assuming that you use Storm, who is the best for this restriction, Cyclops lead and Dazzler support is the best way to go. But yeah, you can still use the other characters that you can see on your screens, alternate them, and yeah, get the best value out of them. Next, we have the Combat Villain Male Restriction. It's for Alliance Battle Day 6. However, we covered all of these characters already in the Villain Combat Restriction in Alliance Battle Extreme. Now, I'd say the same thing. Taskmaster, Red Hulk are the best supports here. And then if you want to build a Hulk team, you can use Abomination paired up with Red Hulk. But yeah, let's just swiftly move on to the next restriction. Now we have the Villain Alien Restriction for Alliance Battle Legends Day 7. The standout options for this restriction is Enchantress followed by Proxima. Now I also included Ronin with his villain uniform so that he qualifies for this restriction. If you have a very good build on Ronin, for example like an Insight on him, and you want to utilize that, you can use Ronin's previous uniform. But yeah, there's not much else to say, so let's move on to the next one. So now we have Alliance Battle Legends Day 11. The restriction for this day is Villain Male. Most of these characters we already covered in the Villain Human Restriction, but yeah, I'd say the best combination again would be Green Goblin and Taskmaster. Now depending on who you use, you can probably sub in Falcon with his zombie uniform, and yeah, if you have Mysterio seasonal uniform, you can utilize that with Taskmaster or Green Goblin. Following that, we have the Hero Human Female Restriction for Alliance Battle Legends Day 12. You have 4 options for this restriction, and all of them have similar value. I would prioritize Shuri first because she has insane value on a brand new account. You can keep her a staple on this team and then switch out the other support for any of the 3 characters that you can see on the screen. Following that, we have Alliance Battle Legends Day 13, with mutant female restriction. Here I'd prioritize Dazzler because she's just an insane support for mutants, and then followed by that, both Mystique and Polaris hold similar value, but since Polaris has a leadership, I'd probably go for her if you are focusing on this restriction specifically. But since Mystique has so much overall value in Alliance Battle, I honestly think it's a better shout going for Mystique. That brings us to the Speed Hero Male restriction for Day 14 of Alliance Battle Legends. Here, the best pick would be Nick Fury, and then followed by that, it would be Amadeus Cho because of his universal usability. Now, the niche supports would be Joaquin Torres for Falcon and Scarlet Spider for Miles. I wouldn't recommend either of them, and I would suggest sticking with Winter Soldier and utilizing Nick Fury and Amadeus Cho. Now we have Day 18 of Alliance Battle Legends, Speed Female Restriction. We already went through all of these characters when we covered the first restriction, but yeah, again, Wave and Shuri are the best combination. Alternatively, you can use Cassie Lang while you build either of these characters. Let's move on to the next one. Now we have Combat Alien Restriction for Alliance Battle Legends, Day 19. All the options for this restriction are very strong. You don't even have to include the seasonal uniform to get insane results. Athena, the new character, has an insane support. Same for Valkyrie. On top of that, she also has a support artifact. So yeah, let's just swiftly move on to the next restriction. For Alliance Battle Legends Day 20, we have Blast Hero Male restriction. The best support for this day has to be Cyclops. In addition to that, you have Phil Coulson. Again, he's usable without his seasonal uniform, but I'd highly recommend picking that up during the winter seasonal. Additionally, you can also use Ancient One with his seasonal uniform, but it's not that good, so I wouldn't really recommend that. We then move on to the Inhumans restriction for Alliance Battle Legends Day 21. Now, assuming you don't have Black Bolt's seasonal uniform, I'd suggest using Gorgon's leadership with Medusa's support. This is also assuming that your DPS character is Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan. With the Inhumans tag being added to Alliance Battle restriction recently, there isn't that many good DPSs for this restriction. So yeah, you just have to work with what you have at the moment, and out of the 3 tier 4 characters in this restriction, 2 of them are usable here. The other one is Medusa, and she is, in my opinion, better off as a support. And a lot of you guys have asked me regarding who is better for this restriction, Kamala Khan or Black Bolt. I'd have to say Black Bolt because from my testing, he did score better than Kamala Khan. Now you can do your testing for yourself, or if you prefer Kamala Khan, you can use her, but yeah, that's just my take. Next up, we have Alliance Battle Legends Day 25, Universal Female. For this restriction, your primary support would be Proxima, and then you can pair her up with Philavel or Angela. Now, Angela's support is only for superhero characters. If you do plan on using Scarlet Witch's villain uniform, for example, you can't utilize her. So yeah, keep that in mind before you invest into any uniforms. Next, we have Alien Hero restriction. There is a lot of options to pick from in this restriction. In my opinion, the best combination would be Ronin and Valkyrie most likely, unless you have Yondu's seasonal uniform. Now, the other characters on your screen are also very usable, but compared to the 2 I mentioned earlier, I'd say they fall short in the support department. So for Alliance Battle Legends Day 26, these are your support characters. Concluding all the restrictions for Alliance Battle Legends. Now we can move on to Alliance Battle Infinite. Alliance Battle Infinite is the brand new addition to the game. It takes up 8 days from the 28-day season, and at the second day you get this combat restriction. For this combat restriction, the best support characters in my opinion are M'Baku, Athena, Valkyrie, and all the other characters that you see on your screen. There are a couple niche picks, for example Agent Venom and Sleeper being support characters primarily for Venom. And then we also have Abomination and Red Hulk being primarily for Hulk. So yeah, taking that into consideration, whatever DPS you plan on using, you can use the characters that correspond to your DPS. So with that, we can now move on to the next restriction in Alliance Battle Infinite. So on the 9th day of the season, you get to play the Blast restriction. Again, being a very vague restriction, you have a lot of characters to pick from when you want to pick your supports. Now depending on what DPS you use, again, supports may vary. In my opinion, the best supports here would be Cyclops and Dazzler for Storm, and then if you plan on using Doctor Strange, Seasonal Mysterio, and Phil Coulson uniform would be your top pick. However, the alternate characters that I didn't mention, you can also use from time to time until you get the best supports in the game. So yeah, that concludes this restriction. Let's move on to the speed restriction. So on the 16th day of the season, you get access to the speed restriction. The universal support characters that stand out here are Amadeus Cho, Wave, Mystique, and Shuri. However, if you want to go into the niche characters, you can use Nick Fury for superhero support, you can use Chasm for Miles Morales support, you can use Green Goblin for supervillain support. So yeah, again, same thing as the other two restrictions. Depending on what DPS you plan on using here, you can use whichever support you want. As a free-to-play alternative here, Gamora and Miles Morales really performs well, but yeah, Miles Morales is a seasonal uniform. But yeah, with that being said, let's move on to the penultimate restriction in this video. On the 23rd day of the season, you get access to the universal restriction in Alliance Battle Infinite. There's a lot of options when it comes to the DPS characters for this restriction, hence why there's a lot of combinations of supports you can use. If you plan on using a flame elemental damage character, you can use, for example, Beta Ray Bill's lead, and then Ghost Panther as a support. And then if you plan on using a character who isn't an elemental damage character, you can use Ronin paired up with Dr. Voodoo or even Proxima, and then yeah, it just goes on. So yeah, depending on your DPS, again, you can pick the ideal support for your team. However, I would prioritize a character with a support artifact, for example Ronin, or someone like Valkyrie even from one of the previous restrictions. And that brings us to the final restriction in Alliance Battle, the no restriction restriction. So yeah, for day 3, 10, 17, 23, and 24 of the season, you get to play no restriction Alliance Battle Infinite. Regardless of who the best is for this restriction, I would highly suggest you use your account's best character here. Once you select your DPS, you can test out different supports with your DPS to see how he performs with different combinations. I would prioritize building characters who provide universal support ability, so characters that give boosts and buffs to all allies instead of characters who provide buffs to certain types and certain allies. For example, M'Baku provides support buffs to all allies. Similarly, Cyclops provides support buffs to all allies, while Nick Fury, for example, provides only support buffs to hero characters. Dazzler only provides support buffs to mutant characters. While they might be good in certain restrictions, having a character who provides buff in every scenario is much more helpful. And also, again, prioritize characters who have artifacts, because while they are good on their own, their artifacts eventually increase their overall value. So yeah, it gives you room to improve your supports. And that brings us to the end of this video. Good luck optimizing your roster for Alliance Battle, because it is a very long procedure. But you have to stay patient and eventually you will reach crazy heights over time. But yeah, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. If I did miss anything, be sure to mention that. And if this video helped you out, drop a like, subscribe, and consider becoming a member if you want to support the channel. But that's it from me, guys. I'll catch you in the next one. And peace.